Hey everyone, I'm Carrie Pena. Thank you so much for listening to Carrie Pena Reports on iTunes and on Stitcher. And thanks for watching our live feed. You can always see our shows on Facebook at Carrie Pena or, of course, on our site, inspiredmedia360.com. I have someone really cool to introduce to you today. I'm excited that he's joining us in studio. We're talking about how to build a personal brand and why that is so important. Joining us is David Lux, a branding and PR expert who has quite an amazing story to share. David, thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you were a big deal in Hollywood, and we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. You're also going to share some of your personal branding tips, and you have amazing tips to share. Mm-hmm. But first, when I met you, I was so struck by your personal story and why you grew up in Phoenix, right?
I was born in Phoenix.
You were born in Phoenix.
And then moved away when I was 4. But all of my family was out here, and my sister and I would spend half the summer out here with our grandparents. And so I always felt, a sort of affinity for this place, and it felt like a second home. Not
everyone would be able to break away from the bright lights of Hollywood and come home for the reasons that you did. It's really all about family.
It is. There's some sadness involved. What happened was a few years ago, my grandmother passed away, and she was sort of a central figure in my life and in my mother's life and my sister's life. And I just sort of thought, my mother had moved back here to Phoenix at that stage in her life as well, when she was my age. And I was sort of wondering, is this time to make a change? And was this sort of a sign, that was sort of leading me to do it? And so I came out here, and my mother was thinking, why don't you just spend like a month out here, just be in the house, be in my grandmother's house, and just sort of see if you like it. It's very different from Los Angeles, and I thought, okay, I'll take this time, I'll do it. And I found, going through old boxes and things like that, I found this letter up in a box of mementos that my grandmother had obviously kept all these years, and it was a letter from my high school history teacher. It was a letter of rec talking about all the things that I would do in my life, and UCLA had to take me because this kid's going to be really world-changing. I mean, all the things that you want to hear as an 18-year-old. And I haven't seen this letter in 25 years, and so I'm reading it, and as much as I don't believe necessarily in voices from beyond, but it was the closest thing to my grandmother telling me, like, stay. You've been doing things in Hollywood your whole career. What about everything else that you were going to do? What about living in different cities around the world? What about working in different industries? I hadn't done any of that. I had just been doing Hollywood, which is very lucrative, very fun, something I was very good at. But it was time for a change. And I'm somebody who believes in chapters in people's lives, and this was as clear an indication that I needed to come back here. So I sold my place in West Hollywood and came out here, and sort of never looked back. And my mother said, it's going to take you a while to find your people out here and to find what moves you out here. And she says, give yourself a couple of years. And she was, my mom's right about basically everything. So she was right, and she was right about this. Almost, 2 years to the day. My mother and I, we were talking about this, how my mother and I would go out to lunch. We still do this every Saturday. And we go, we both live up in North Scottsdale, and so, it's kind of far away from our roots of Phoenix, which are all here in Central Phoenix. So after going to lunch, one time I ran into a guy who introduced me to somebody, who introduced me to people, and then before I know it, there were a whole group of network that I had out here of people that were all doing things that I thought were really interesting, and it felt as if, I felt like I was home, and it's been really fun because so many people have been so generous with introducing me to people. And the other day I was able to do that for somebody in return, which is something that I used to do in Hollywood all the time.
Yeah.
When you've been somewhere for as long as I was there, you just know people and you can help people.
Yeah.
And I finally am able to start doing that myself to repay people that have done that for me.
Even though you felt that your grandmother's love and guidance was bringing you back to Phoenix, did you have anxiety? Because that's a major life change. You're upending your whole career at that moment? And
yeah, well, I mean, by the time that I was coming out here, I had already sort of transitioned out of Hollywood. I was working for a tech startup in LA that had a Hollywood bent to it, but it was not as deep in the throes of it. But yes, making that change was huge. And sometimes I think I look back on something and say I had no idea what I was doing. I just was doing it.
Yeah. And
sometimes you have to put the blinders on and just kind of know that you're not running from something, you're running to something.
I love that.
And and of course it helps, having my family here, and I couldn't imagine being any other place than there right now,
So you worked for ICM, William Morris, 20th Century Fox.
Yes.
Major Hollywood powerhouses.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the difference and the importance of building a personal brand, as you did for so many Hollywood celebrities,
right,
as opposed to building a company brand.
Right.
Because now for business leaders, this is very, very key.
Yeah. Okay, so the difference between personal branding and corporate branding is that it's a matter of scope and size and the tone that you take of it. A corporate brand is going to obviously have more people involved in it, more people that are going to want to be weighing in on it. They're going to have perhaps hundreds of employees across different cities, states, countries, or continents even. And so you're going to have a lot of different people trying to make that sort of thing happen. You're also going to probably have some lawyers involved that are going to want to make everything a little bit more blander, perhaps. A personal brand can be much more nimble. It can be much more flexible. It's kind of whimsical. It can be about whatever it is that you want it to be about, and the approval process on that is just you. So it's not as difficult, to make that sort of thing happen. And as you change, your brand can change as well. If you have a website and let's say, you take up a new thing, or you get a new project, or you get a new position, or you move to a new city, those are all things that you can sort of incorporate into that, right away.
I hear a lot of people ask me, good, hardworking people, doctors,
yes,
lawyers, what have you. Well, why do I have to worry about building my brand? I'm focusing on my work. I'm good at my profession.
Right.
Why do I need to worry about my brand?
Well, funny you should ask. I think there are three main reasons that I think that personal branding is important now. One is we've learned now that storytelling is sort of key to reputation management. If you can create meaning in what you're doing, it makes you a more attractive person, a more attractive candidate, a more attractive restaurant to go to. So let's take two different examples. Here's one. Okay, I'm a chef, and the reason why I am is because my grandmother from the old country didn't speak English, and when she lived out here with us, the only way that we could communicate was through food. And she taught me how to cook, and she would let me be in the kitchen when nobody else would. And, I saw the power of food to bring people together, to sort of bridge divides. And now that's why I'm a chef, and I want to give that to people every night, okay? And then you have another person who says, I'm a chef because, I really like great food, and I won an award for my food. That second chef might be a better chef. But the first chef is giving you an experience, a whole story that you want to go in and be a part of. And so it's a completely different kind of thing. One is more transactional, like I will give you food, okay, which I think is a pretty low bar to have. The other one is I will give you an experience and something that you can find your own meaning and add to it.
And don't you think that this is the best way to build clientele, build an audience in whatever industry you're in, is to find ways to connect with people in an authentic way?
Oh yeah, the smartest thing that you can do is have a brand that is sort of flexible enough that other people can add to it. A brand isn't something that is boring and static. A brand is something that's always changing. And the difference between the importance of it with a personal brand is that you can take your brand with you when you leave a company. It used to be that you would stay at a company for 30 years. It doesn't happen anymore. Entrepreneurs certainly don't do that. Freelance people certainly don't do that. If you have your brand, you can take it with you wherever you go.
Let's give I asked you for your top tips for business leaders to build a great brand, and you have some great tips tips.
Okay.
The first one is find your origin story.
Yes. So here's a perfect example. You see all these comic book movies, and even though the fanboys know exactly where Batman came from, they still like to include Batman's origin story with the bats flying around him and the thing, and you sort of see how it is that he became this sort of person, okay? So here's a perfect example. When we were talking before about me, my progression through Hollywood, it would be much more interesting if I were to say that I ended up at Fox after learning how to read because of Star Wars. You know, that when that movie came out, I was a slow learner when it came to reading. But because of that movie, when it came out, I needed to get more of it as a kid, and there were no other movies to sort of like, you know, feed that appetite. But there was a book. And so I read that book cover to cover 1 million times. So flash forward, you know, now 25 years later, I go to work at Fox. That sort of having that through line is something that I think is empowering to people. And the other tip that I would have for people is just be more open to life. You know, you're going if you are somebody who wants to rebrand yourself as like a vegan rock climbing chef, you need to be those things. You can't just say that you are. You need to read a lot. You need to experience your city, and you need to stay open to new adventures all the time.
And you say being well-rounded helps
Yes.
you connect with people.
Yes, I mean, because like I said, if you were somebody that, you know, sometimes you see these people that say, I just eat, sleep, drink, and then go back to, you know, this thing that I do. That's not interesting to people, I don't think. You know, anytime that I've ever hired somebody, I've always wanted them to have a life outside of what they do at the office. That's why I think diversity is so important, not just for its own sake, but because it makes a business better. So the more diverse experiences you have in your life, the better your brand is going to be.
So how do you feel today? Now you've taken on a new role at a great firm here, Felice and Whitney. They are amazing people that you've joined up with.
Yes, they are.
And you guys are actually building out a wing of the firm that you're going to be overseeing that is personal brand building.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me quickly about that.
Well, it's kind of like basically everything that we're talking about here. You know, it's it used to be that you could get along with that, with like a LinkedIn account and maybe a Twitter account and something like that. You know, maybe a Facebook page that you had cat memes on or something like that. You know, but it's not like that now. You know, people around the globe are competing with you for the work that you want to do. And while that's kind of scary to some people, it's a huge opportunity because it also means that you can interact with the world as well. But that doesn't start unless you can be discovered. And building a presence for yourself, both online, on social media, and also a dyed-in-the-wool publicist here, relationships with people in the press that can tell your story for you as well. Those are all things that matter implicitly to today's market. It's a global market. It's not enough. I think you and I were talking when we first met about how Arizona is known for having some of the best resorts in the world. And then you get out on the highway and you see these motels that are advertising free HBO.
Yeah, I drive faster past those motels.
Exactly. Those people have lost. They've lost, and you want to be the resort that is offering a new thing, a new way to look at themselves, a new way to look
But
at
you know what? You raise a good
time.
point, because even if it's not a highfalutin, gorgeous, multi-million-dollar hotel like the Phoenician, you could still be in the game if you figured out what your brand is. So you've got maybe a cool, funky little hotel that has great service or whatever it is.
Yes.
So that's a great example there. One last question for you. How, though, do people navigate how overwhelming it can be to figure out the social media and all of these things? I hear people talk all the time about how their head's just spinning. What do they post? Or, they want to get in the storytelling game, but it's not always. You've done it for years. You've done it for big names like Julia Roberts. Right. But, Well,
Julia was a client of ICM. She wasn't my client at the time.
But you've been there.
Yes. You have to sort of accept that you are somebody who has a story to tell, okay? And you have to take the time to figure out what that story is. Granted, when you're a movie star, they tell it for you, and there's a whole mythology that gets sort of built up around you.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you're somebody who's just sort of going about their business, opening up a restaurant, let's say, or if, say, you're a new graduate who's starting to do that, you need to sort of find the things that make you sort of interesting. And then, the word authentic gets thrown around a lot, but it really just means like, is this something that would interest you? There are enough people out there in the world that will respond to you if you just accept the things about you that are quirky or interesting and sort of go with that. You're never going to stand out from the crowd if you're trying to do what somebody already else is doing. You have to find the thing that makes you different, and you have to sort of own that and not think that it's something that you need to be quiet about.
How do you feel today, having made this major life change?
Oh, I feel great. It's funny. The fact that this is down the street, your studio is down the street from Cine Capri, where Cine Capri used to be, which is where I saw Star Wars. So it's like great full circle is wonderful. This is my favorite time of year. It's absolutely beautiful here. I drove down here and it was, I felt like singing. I'm not a good singer, but I felt like singing because it was that.
You took a risk,
yeah.
And it paid off. Because you weren't afraid to see what this next chapter would be.
No.
In your life.
No, and by the way, like the other thing that you can always remember is that like if something doesn't work out, you can always rebrand yourself and try again.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
What do you mean? Where can they find me? Like,
what's your website? Like what's your street address?
You can find me at my Twitter account is David Allen ALAN Lux. You can also find me on LinkedIn under that name. Our website is felicewhitney.com. This is a new chapter that we're going to be doing, and I really like the people that are there. They're sort of these scientists with the hearts of artists.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a really fun new chapter for us and also for Phoenix.
By the way, I was telling David before we started, he has the best TV name. Good evening, I'm David Lux, or for short, Deluxe.
Right.
Thank you very much, David,
Absolutely.
for being here.
Thanks,
Great to
Carrie.
have you.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching and listening to Carrie Pena Reports. You can always find us online at Inspired Media 360. And be sure to subscribe so you can stay in touch with us. And we always love to hear your feedback. Today's show produced and engineered by Shannon Hernandez, brought to you by Inspired Media 360. Until next time, stay inspired.